Hey, thanks for checking out my video. Chris here from Meditations on the Tarot. Today I wanted to talk about the archetypes in the tarot, the concept of archetypes and how the tarot works and why the tarot works. First, let's talk about the concept of archetypes. One example of an archetype would be the Fool, right? Find the Fool card here. And here's the Fool, and he doesn't have a lot of experience, so he's young and he's off on his journey. You can tell by got his bags packed, and he has his eyes in the sky, so he's really not paying attention to what's in front of him, about to fall over the cliff because he just doesn't have a whole lot of life experience. And here's this little dog kind of warning him, like, hey, you're about to fall over the cliff here, but it's a beautiful day, the sun's shining, he's checking out the scenery here, and he's got his white rose of innocence, and that's, he just doesn't have a whole lot of experience, and in that way he's foolish. Not that he's a fool that we might think of today, but that he's just lacks experience. He lacks any life experience, and that's the Fool. Another archetype expressed in the tarot is the Hermit. The Hermit is introspection. It's when we start getting into our inner thoughts. Sometimes we kind of hermit up and we spend time with a good book, and that's that archetype of the Hermit, where we just kind of closed in, introspective, and thinking about our life. And maybe you might clam up for a while, you might hermit up for a while, and then you might come to some realization and be off on your journey again, right? And we all play these different roles of these different archetypes. And I found that when I'm learning these tarot cards, I found that it helped me to come to an understanding. So I know that we can say it helps you come to an understanding. You know, what does that mean? So on a personal level, what that means, I was really confused about a relationship that I had. I was really just confounded, couldn't really understand why, any of it, why. And I asked the tarot cards to answer this question for me. And the one card that's supposed to represent a person, the one main card in the spread, and that card talked about the Princess of Wands. And the Princess of Wands is just having a good time, you know, love of life, falls in love easily and falls out of love easily. And when they fall in love with one person, then maybe down the road they fall in love with the next person. It's as if the previous didn't exist. They really don't clean up any of the messes that they leave behind. And that's this archetype of the Princess of Wands. And I just started realizing, gosh, that explains it to a T, and all the confusion that I had over this situation was gone. All the hurt that I had over this situation was completely gone, and I was left with an understanding, okay, that person's playing this role, this Princess of Wands in this situation, and in this situation maybe I was being the fool, maybe being ignorant and didn't have a lot of experience in this situation. We all take turns playing these different roles, playing these different archetypal roles. And when you can understand these archetypes, that can lead you to an understanding where you don't need to be hurt, right? You don't need to be confused and confounded, because we're all just playing these parts in this universal drama that somehow we got into. A lot of people talk about tarot cards as divination tools, as fortune telling, and I wanted to talk about the tarot as meditation tools. So one way of meditating with the tarot is that you could just sit there and look at the tarot card, one tarot card, for maybe 5 minutes, and then turn the tarot card over and see how much you can remember from that. Maybe write it down, and then flip the tarot card back and look at what did you leave out, what did you miss. And in that way, it's a great way to learn the tarot cards. And I see the tarot cards as primarily a meditation tool, and I see them as a way of understanding the situation that we're in. I see them as an ancient book of wisdom that's been handed down from an Atlantean society. And by Atlantean, it doesn't I'm not saying that there was a continent of Atlantis or there wasn't a continent of Atlantis. It doesn't matter the continent, but the people, the Atlanteans, the Atlantean society did exist. These people weren't hunter-gatherers building these pyramids and stuff. This is an Atlantean society, a previous society. They had a lot of wisdom and understanding, and they took that wisdom and understanding, they put it into the tarot cards, and it was able to survive that particular cataclysm. So when we talk about tarot cards, they don't always have to be divination or fortune telling. They can also be meditation tools that can help lead us to an understanding of life, like I just talked about. So Vincent Petici, he wrote a really great book, a really important book called The Genius of the Tarot. And in that book, he explains how the tarot works and why the tarot works. And he really does. It really does make sense. And when you get done reading that book, you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about. So in The Genius of the Tarot, Vincent Petici talks about productive thinking and reproductive thinking. Productive thinking might be like a baby. You're grabbing this and you're grabbing, what's this? What's that? And reproductive thinking would be like, oh, I've experienced this before, so this is just like that, and that's just like that. And putting things into little categories and boxes, that's reproductive thinking. But when you have a child's mind and you're just reaching out, when you're playing the role of the fool, or you don't have this experience, that's productive thinking. And Vincent Petici, in his book, The Genius of the Tarot, talks about problem solving through random stimulus. So as human beings, we are problem solvers, and we're aggressive problem solvers. We've always been and probably always will be problem solvers. And problem solving through random stimulus, that's why the tarot works. An example of random stimulus would be, there was a man that was hired to create a better can opener, and he used a process called creative thinking, where you introduce a random stimulus to help solve your problem. It doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. And he was out in his garden, and he's popping open a pea pod, and he's eating the peas out of the pea pod, and it occurred to him, well, maybe instead of making a better can opener, maybe we should make a better can that just pops open like a pea pod. You just pop it open, and that's that can of cat food that we open every day now. And this person was hired to use creative thinking to solve that problem through random stimulus, and that's exactly how the tarot works. We've always looked at the cards, what's the power in these cards, but the power isn't in the cards, the power is in the positions of the tarot spread. And that's this random stimulus. You take these different archetypes and you put them into slot. Maybe one is supposed to represent the person or the problem, and slot 2 is supposed to represent different aspects of the situation. And so we take these different archetypes and put them into these different roles, and it's called creative thinking, using a random stimulus to solve your problem. And that is how the tarot works, and that's why the tarot works. And you might want to look up Vincent Petici here on YouTube. He has about an hour-long presentation that he did. He's passed away now, but he has an hour-long presentation that he does about the tarot that's really, really great. It really helps explain this concept of random stimulus and creative thinking that I'm talking about. Another concept that was introduced to me through the tarot cards is the 4 elements: the fire, water, air, and earth, or swords, cups, wands, and discs. And when we get into these 4 different elements, the fire or swords might represent something quick action, or something hot, or something immediate, an action. And water might represent something flowing, or something calm or soothing. Air or wands, that might represent philosophy, the thought, the concepts. And the earth or disc, that might represent something physical. And so again, we have this is a lens. The 4 elements, as represented in the tarot, are a lens through which we can view our world. So we could take a look at any given situation and say, okay, what's the fire aspect of this situation, or the sword aspect of this situation? What's the immediacy or the burning sensation. We can also step back and say, okay, what are the watery aspects of this situation? And so we also can not just the four elements, right? The fire, water, air, and earth. And there's also this concept in the tarot of the 1 through 10 and the small cards, which we often overlook. But this concept of 1 through 10 in the Kabbalah, when you understand what these different 10 points mean in the language of the Kabbalah, then you can understand. And again, it's not just the one, but it's the one as seen through the lens of fire or swords. It's the one as seen through cups or water. It's the one as seen through the air perspective or wands, and also the one as earth or discs. So there's this concept of 1 through 10 in the Kabbalah, which are an additional set of lenses on top of the four elements, on top of the 22 trumps of the tarot. These are ways for us to look at life. The tarot I believe, is an ancient book of knowledge, and the reason that it's in the form of a game is because it had to be handed down to us in the form of a game. Sometimes when we make a political commentary or a religious commentary, it could be considered heretical. You could really take a lot of backlash for that. But if you put it in the form of a movie, or you put it in the form of a fictitious novel, also if you put it in the form of a game, somehow that's okay. So that some of these statements that were being made in the tarot were heretical to the Pope at the time, and they had to disguise this ancient book of knowledge in the form of a game so that it would last, so that it would make it from generation to generation. So when we talk about ancient alchemy, a lot of people have this concept of ancient alchemy that they're trying to turn lead into gold, and these are what you call puffers. And the puffer would sit in his house with his bellows, right, puffing, and he would be at his fireplace trying to turn these different stone ores into different metals. He was trying to make gold, and he's sitting there puffing with his bellows for his whole life while life's passing him by, while he's neglecting his responsibilities to his family and to himself. He's just puffing away with his bellows, puffing away, and he never achieves the goal. And in the same way that puffers have come to represent alchemy wrongly, fortune tellers have wrongly came to represent the tarot. So the tarot is an ancient book of knowledge that's being handed down to us, and fortune tellers give that book of knowledge a bad name in the same way that these puffers give alchemy a bad name. So it's important that we understand the difference between the tarot and fortune tellers, and we understand the difference between alchemy and puffers. There's a big difference. One example of the tarot being used in life, it would be the Hendai cross, and there's a chapter in Fulcanelli's book, The Mystery of the Cathedrals, and it's a chapter called The Cyclic Cross of Hendai, and I read that entire chapter on my YouTube channel, so if you want to check that video out after this. But in that chapter, he describes this cross of Hendai, and he describes this cross of Hendai as being a monument to the end of time. And he talks about there being 26,000 year cycles, and that's how long it takes for our planet to go all the way around our Milky Way galaxy, 26,000 years. And there's a concept that somewhere in this 26,000 year cycle, there's a concept that there's an asteroids or something that hits the Earth every 26,000 years and bombs us back into the Stone Age, and that would be like the Jungas Dryas incident. And if you think about that, that really does make a lot of sense. Where there was this previous Atlantean society, where did it go? Well, if there were a cataclysm, if there were an impact of some sort, they probably got wiped out. There are some remnants of the Atlantean society, and one of those remnants is this book of ancient knowledge that we call the tarot. how I got started in the tarot. A friend of mine had made an oracle deck, and so I was looking at that. And I was really impressed with it. I really wanted to get one, and I thought, gosh, I'd really love to make one of these. I'd really love to make a tarot deck. And so that was my goal. I was going to make a tarot deck, but I guess first I have to learn what is it, what is the tarot. You can't very well make a tarot deck if you don't understand what is the tarot. So as I'm looking into all these different aspects of it, I'm learning about Rosicrucianism, I'm learning about alchemy, I'm learning about all these different things, and all of a sudden it just, making the tarot deck just really isn't all that important anymore. It's not about that anymore. It's about this awakening that takes place when you understand these different archetypes and you understand these different lenses, different ways of looking at life. That is in itself an initiation into the mysteries of life. The thing about awakening is that if we're going to awaken as a society, we may need to drop this concept of man versus animal or man versus himself, this aggressive problem solving that has been with us from day one. We may need to drop this attitude, and we may need to just calm ourselves and realize that not every perspective has to have a problem. Like I was having breakfast last week with some good friends, and I was asking them some questions, and they're both professional filmmakers, and so it was really interesting to talk to them. And I asked them about different topics that they were putting in their movies, and they were kind of asking me how I felt about the news. And I told them I feel like that the news just makes me depressed, and it's all sad news, and I just can't watch it. It gives me a headache, And they said they were also talking too about these. That the Happy News Network, nobody watches it. When they tried to do the Happy News, nobody tuned in, and eventually they had to just knock it off because the masses aren't interested in happiness. The masses need this problem in our life because we're aggressive problem solvers. So I think that if we're going to have an awakening as a species, we're going to have to learn to drop this problem solving. Eventually we will have solved the problems, and there comes a day when you can just relax and just meditate and just vibrate. Take your vibration, match it with the vibration of the earth, match it with the vibration of the people around you, and that we can just be a positive vibratory force, so that we can take this positivity and we could send it to the cosmos, to the entire world, to the entire universe. And so at breakfast they were talking about, well, if there's no problem, then there's no interest. If I want to make a movie about this, I need to know what's the problem. Does someone need funding, or does somebody need help, or is there something that we can do? And no problem equals no interest. And another good way of illustrating that would be my YouTube channel. These videos that I make, they get like 50 views, 20 views. I'll talk about this and that, about the meditations on the tarot is what I call it. And I'm getting a really small amount of views. But I've got a video of this guy getting tasered on the Max train. And it was one of my first videos before I started to getting into this stuff. And this guy's getting tasered on the Max and screaming, and it's just completely out of control. And I get the whole thing on video and posted it. And that video has got like 5,000 views. I can't even get 500 views on one of my videos about positivity, about awakening, about learning about life and the concept of the archetypes and how and why the tarot works. I can't get 5,000 views on that, but there's this guy getting tasered by the police, and I can get 5,000 views, no problem. And that's this thinking. That's this thinking that we've been trapped into, that there has to be a problem. We want to look at the problem and solve the problem, but eventually, if we're going to have an awakening, we have to step past this problem, and even past solution. Solution's only an aspect of the problem. if we're going to have an awakening as a society, we have to step out of this problem. So the concept of the archetypes, that's how the tarot works. And if we meditate on these different archetypes, it will lead us to a greater understanding. Tarot cards are meditation tools. If they want to use them for fortune telling or divination, that's their perspective. But primarily, the tarot is an ancient book of wisdom that's been handed down to us from a previous Atlantean society. But I appreciate you taking the time to watch the video. Peace profound, and L.V.X.